And welcome to Global Regulatory Affairs Digital Week, brought to you by Informa Connect. My name is Felicity, and I will be your host for today's session titled The Impact of Technology on the Future of Regulatory Content Management. First off, I will just cover a few quick housekeeping items. If you do experience any difficulties with audio or advancing slides, please refresh your screen with F5. And if you're experiencing any other issues, please hit the question mark button to receive assistance. At any time during the presentation, you can submit your questions into the Q&A window on the left-hand side of your screen. And in 24 hours, you will receive the link to watch this recording of the session, so you can download a few featured articles in the resource list box to the right-hand side of your screen. Now let's begin by introducing our speakers for today's session. We have Jackie Leslie, who is the category specialist of life sciences at Esko. We also have David Turner, who is the consultant in publishing, automation, digital transformation and content technologies at Data Conversion Laboratory. And we have Regina Lynn Preciado, who is a Senior Director of Content Strategy Solutions at Content Rules. Thank you so much for joining us all today. I will now hand it over to David to begin the presentation.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Felicity. We appreciate it, and we're excited to have the chance to talk today and to talk specifically about how technology is going to impact regulatory or regulatory content management. So let's get started. First of all, when we think about the impact of technology, we do know that new technology often leads to change, but usually it doesn't happen right away. In fact, it usually causes news first and then fear shortly thereafter. I think there's been no shortage of news and fear around things like Chat GPT lately and how it's going to take all of our jobs. But there is hope. Technology is one of those things that we're always really good at adapting to, but it can be kind of slow because honestly, we're all a little bit averse to change. And we've seen that around things like, new technologies related to pharma content, specifically the concept of structured content management, which you may hear is called SCM today as well. But again, there is hope. I go back and I think about the PC. If you watch old movies like I do, back in the 1960s and 1970s, you don't see PCs in an office environment. But we adapted, and today, it's a very pervasive thing to have a computer on your desk. Or I think about the internet. I'm actually old enough to have been a part of when the internet first started taking off. However, my company that I worked for, I didn't just open up, Chrome and start browsing. I had to go down to a special computer lab and, press this thing that made this little box that made these funny noises, and opened up something called Netscape so that I could search. Although I didn't really have that many things to search. I can remember somebody in my family making a comment that they weren't even sure there was anything on the internet worth searching for. But obviously that's changed. Technology's made an impact, and today we can't go more than 10 minutes without looking at something on the internet. Another example I think about is the online meeting. How often did you have a Teams meeting or a Zoom meeting, in 2010 or 2012? Today I have dozens of these meetings every month. So technology's obviously made an impact, and we've obviously adapted, but it really wasn't just necessarily the availability of that technology that caused the change. But when you think about it, we had computers before the 80s. We had the internet before the mid to late 90s, and we had Zoom before 2020. I had a Zoom account in 2012, I think. Maybe it's 2013. So what I would propose is actually there are two things besides the technology that really help to facilitate this kind of change. The first thing is you've got to have really compelling reasons to make a change. Right? It could be something as simple as everybody else is making the change, so you got to get on board. It could be that the benefits just start to outweigh the efforts. It could be the government. We've got conversations today about IDMP. changes in government regulations and requirements sometimes drive that change. Or sometimes it takes a global pandemic to drive that. But the second piece, besides just the compelling reasons to change, is you really have to have the infrastructure and the other technologies that support your technology so that it becomes easy, right? So I think back to the example of the computers. Computers took off in the 80s in no small part because of the development of software like MS-DOS, and other types of software. The internet became a part of our daily lives as laptops became part of our daily lives, and mobile devices became the norm. We could do Teams and Zooms meetings so much faster and easier today because we have internet speeds that support it. In 2010, I think the federal broadband standard download speed was like 4 megabytes per second. In 2020, it's 25 megabytes per second, 6 times faster. So that infrastructure piece can be really, really important. Another example I often give is, electric cars. I think most of us can get behind the idea of having electric cars. Good for the environment, good for everyone. But outside of, some major metropolitan areas, they haven't really taken off. And what the media tells us is that a lot of people, when they're polled, they don't really feel like that infrastructure is there. So anyways, we're going to talk about this today, and we're going to talk about this specifically around the realm of structured content management, because SCM is going to be coming to pharma, and I think it's sooner rather than later. And I think that now we have these compelling reasons to change, and that infrastructure is there. So we've set up our presentation around this. I'm going to hand it off here to Regina in just a second, and she's going to talk about some of those compelling reasons. And so I was going to give a little bit of a background and in this sort of this section about digital transformation. And then we're going to pass it on to Jackie after that, and she's going to talk about some of the infrastructure that's there, some of the technologies that are making this happen in real time today. And then we'll finish up with some time for questions and for a summary at the end. So without any further ado, Regina, it's all yours. Take it away.
Thank you, David. So talking about compelling reasons to change and the changing of the technology, when everyone went digital, sort of, 20, 30 years ago, maybe longer, what was really embraced was the word processors, word processing documents. So like Microsoft Word, or back in the day, WordPerfect, there were some other tools. And we took our writing and our illustrating and our data processes from a print publishing paradigm into the computer, where we replicated everything the way we had been doing it before. So we have word processing documents, they're long documents. To pull documents together, we often copy content from other documents, paste it into our documents. Once it's there, many people cannot resist tweaking it, even if it doesn't need to be tweaked, or you have to rewrite it because what was written before was not written to be reused down the line exactly as it was originally written. So this copy and paste and then tweaking or editing or revising is a very, very common way of working in producing regulatory content. At first, this felt very fast because in a word processing file, you can do things like format. You can paste an illustration. You can do things that was much harder in a print-based world to do right as you were writing. But compared to what we have available today in our technology, this is actually very slow. Working in long documents, working with copy-paste, it is a slow process. It's very manual, and it introduces a lot of risk. We all know you can copy and paste, and if you miss one line or one character, that can really change the meaning of what you've just pasted. And it requires lots of reviewing and intense focus on the quality in order to make sure that the document is all present and correct. So when we talk about digital transformation and we talk about structured content management as part of a digital transformation, we're really talking about working with components of information rather than long documents. A component of information is a small piece of information. It might be just data. It might be just content. I'm kind of making air quotes with my fingers. Mostly it is a combination of written content and data. It could be a table, but it provides some context around the data. And with this component idea, we are taking our information, creating it in smaller pieces that then can be assembled into a longer form, such as a document, although not limited to a document. With a component structured content management technology, we no longer have to copy and paste. I know that sounds really simple. Oh, copy, paste. Well, you just do that. But really, with components, you are not copying and pasting anymore. You can really use and reuse the content that has been created as it is. So we get to this single source of truth, which is very important for data and content that must be accurate, and where you do not want to introduce confusion, or you don't want to cause the reviewer to look at something and say, hey, I just read this in the other document, but it said something different. Let me go back and check. Is this the same thing? Even the little change in one word in some terminology or a change in a unit of data can cause some friction in the reader. So with component structured content management, one of the big benefits is that you can create these components of information, which you can then assemble or have automatically assembled into some kind of output, such as a document. By automatically assembling information, we take away this manual formatting step of humans applying the same heading styles over and over again, or you pasted something in and suddenly the bullet list doesn't line up and there's a little 10 seconds to get the bullet list to line up. For any individual author, it doesn't seem like that takes very much time, but when you look across a whole team, particularly a distributed global team, creating information, creating documents, very long documents, trying to create them quickly, all of those little tweaks and formats really add up. So when you go to structured content, one of the benefits is a lot of that formatting can be automated. So the authors are creating content in components. The components are automatically assembled into the right order to meet all the requirements, and then the formatting, heading styles, margins, and everything is applied automatically. One of the other benefits of structured content as part of digital transformation we talk about is the findability. When you move out of long monolithic documents into a more nimble, modular, component-based paradigm, those components have some metadata on them. Now, the metadata, of course, is information about information. So it might be the INN or the internal drug product name or the substance name or some kind, different kinds of information. We tag our components with this information, or the tools can help us by automating some of that tagging, which makes these components highly findable and drives more automation. So that automatically assembling content into a document or an e-label or whatever your output needs to be can again get much more consistent and take the burden off the humans for that repetitive work. And that is driven by this metadata. So I have a comparison table here of what we get from digital documents and what we get from a component-based structured content. So of course, we can still deliver as a document. But when you move to component-based structured content, you also can, the component referencing is that very ability to take a single source of truth, a component of information, and pull it into whatever documents need it. So therapeutic indication, you need to describe that across multiple labels. You have the one unit of information, and it can be referenced into all your labels. Data integration is a big piece. Query a data lake, query the source of data and bring it into your content rather than having humans manually find and copy and paste wherever possible. Other benefits, automating that formatting, automating the assembly of the content. With structure, you get very detailed traceability of every change that's made to the content and who made the change and the timestamp of the change and why it's changed, which is very useful later on. And of course, structure enables digital information exchange. So as we're moving towards submissions that are beyond the document, you're moving toward let's just send our eligibility criteria and see what they think, and then we'll build our protocol around it. So there's all these benefits to moving to structure. But as David says, knowing that these benefits are here is not enough to drive the change. So we have a few compelling reasons to make this change. And I don't want to downplay it. It is a big change. It's a change in how people think about content and a change in how we work with content. So in the initial stages, there's a big change. And then it becomes just the way we do things. So of course, with regulated content, the major compelling reason to change is speed. David was talking about going from dial-up to what, DSL, to cable internet, to broadband, to satellite, and how that 6 times increase in our average download speed has enabled so much change in business. So speed. And I love this quote. This was from a couple of years ago, but Dr. Andrew Badley was talking about how the fast-track part of producing the COVID-19 vaccine was not as much, I know it was fast, not as much in the development, but was in the, quote, paperwork items. Well, that's content.
Yeah. Regina, if I could just jump in here and add something. I think that this was, such a huge thing. We've always wanted to produce drugs faster, but when we got to the pandemic, it sort of reset the level. I mean, it reset the expectations, right? And so people started looking for anything they could do. And I think one of the things they started looking at is all this paperwork. So while we could have done this a few years ago, I think in part the pandemic is driving this change, that there's just this new idea of how fast a drug can get to market.
Absolutely. And we want to be able to do it in a sustainable way and not having, killing people with overwork trying to copy and paste and check their pasted content and make sure everything was accurate, review it 47 times, by harnessing the automation available in structured content. Also, the other demand for speed, of course, there's a cost. And this was an interesting statistic from the UT about delays in drug approvals cost their creators quite a bit of money. And of course, the compelling reason here is that if you have accurate, consistent, fast content, there are fewer delays after you submit and it's being reviewed. So another compelling reason to change is that the users, and that includes regulators, we all have a different expectation now of how we consume content, and that includes reviewing submissions and other regulatory documents. So the users are expecting real-time information. They're expecting to be able to just, David, I think you said we can't go 10 minutes without looking up something on the internet. We walk around with the World Encyclopedia in our pockets now. So users, even if they have a paper label printed in 5-point font on onion skin in a package, want to be able to hop online and search through the digital information to find their answers. So we have these, we're starting to get more looking at these electronic labeling. We're looking at mobile-friendly formats. Again, we don't picture the health authorities sitting down with their tablets to review this information, but we're also not providing the information in a friendly way for anything other than really print or giant monitors, which not everybody has. And of course, users are demanding more personalized content. Different reviewers need to review different amounts of information, or different healthcare providers or patients want to see different types of information. And when all the information is locked in a giant document, it's very hard to find. So with structured content, you can still produce your long documents, and also that digital information is there for other outputs and other ways of delivering the same consistent, accurate information, but by harnessing the automation. And then, of course, probably everyone wants more speed, they want less cost, they want to serve the users, but of course, a lot of what drives the change in the business is that the regulators are, that regulations have been passed that we have to meet. So we have some new submission formats. We have health authorities around the world adopting new technologies. If you look at how we're looking at digital data flow and submitting data prior to wrapping it in a full submission, we're looking at ways to review this information in a faster and even more modular way that the health authorities are providing. And there's some new ways to upload the content rather than in addition to sending a full application or a full submission over according to the CTD and all nicely packaged, we are finding that we can exchange information more quickly with the health authorities in other ways. And I don't think that's going to replace the full submission, certainly not anytime soon, but you're much more able to create and deliver this content at scale when you truly take a digital transformation approach and you componentize it, because structured content is the only way to deliver the right information to the right place at the right time in the right format at scale. And this is why we have been needing these advances in technology that are available today in order to realize this vision. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Jackie.
Well, actually, I'm going to jump in here and be moderator for a second.
Thank you.
Well, first of all, I think, those are fantastic and compelling reasons. I think, when you look at kind of the reset we've had in terms of speed, when you look at the expectations from, end users, whether those are patients or whether those are, medical professionals, or whether those are health authorities, and then you think about the increased regulation, what a change just to have Health Canada requiring XML that's slightly different than what the FDA requires. So now you've got to produce almost the same content, but not quite, if you're going to be in those two markets. And I think if you'd had more time, you probably could have done an entire presentation on compelling reasons. I think about things like, increased risk, and I think about, security and audits and all those things. But you're right. Structured content is the only way to deliver the right information at the right time. Which does now bring us to, so we've got some compelling reasons to change, and those of you in the audience, I hope you've seen that there are a few, and you probably have a few of your own. Feel free to add some in the chat. We can talk about them. But there is the other part of the equation, the advances in tools, the advances in infrastructure and in technology and environment, the things that are going to, really help to facilitate this, So Jackie, I'm going to let you kind of pick it up from here, talk a little bit about, how automation is factoring into this and give some real world examples of what people are doing to take advantage of structured content management.
Perfect. Thanks, David. Yeah, so I'm going to talk a little bit about the technology behind this. And so to continue on from some of the points that Regina was making, it's really a separation of the content, the styling, and the templates, which is how we get to those things that we've been talking about. And when we're talking about content, we use the term reusable chunks. Regina used the term components. We've also heard people refer to this as Lego blocks or fragments of content. So there's lots of different terms for this right now, but the idea is that you have these reusable pieces of content that you can use in different places as needed. And it's not just your base language, it's your translations or your illustrations and images. If you look at that little image in the green circle, content would include basically everything that's on that carton. So it's the logo, the product name, the company name, basically anything that's not the structure. Like the barcode is also included as part of content. So it's all of those little reusable chunks that make up whatever the output is. And then the styling, the second part, is how you want those pieces of content to look in any given output. So your warning statements might look different on the carton than they would look in the submission documents, and they might look slightly different in your IFU. So you can display things differently. It doesn't change what is said, but it might change the look of what is being said. And then the third piece is the template, and that's basically the placeholders on some kind of output that connect the content to the finished piece, if you will. So those three things, we really talk about the elements of everything that's related to structured content. And this diagram, there's maybe a lot going on this page, but I'll just break it down into the elements of it. So the topics that we're talking about, the topics are these reusable chunks. So a topic could be a warning statement, it could be dosage instructions, it could be a manufacturing address. Those are all of the topics that make up your taxonomy of all of your portfolio of products. And then the map is what maps it basically controls the relationship. So you're saying this specific warning statement is used on all of these different outputs. So it's that relationship management mechanism. And if you can envision almost a 3D model of this, then you layer in the translations, because the mapping may be the same or it may be slightly different depending on all of the markets that you're working in, but there are relationships between base languages and translations and reference countries and so on. So it can be quite a complex map of how you're making those relationships. But once that's in place, then you really have that one-to-many relationship. So you have a warning statement that exists once, and then you use it everywhere else it's relevant to. And so there is that reuse that we always talk about, and Regina described that very well as well. It's a huge benefit to how you're managing your content, and it also gives you that instant where used ability or findability, right? So you can instantly see if this warning statement needs to change, I know what the impact is on it. And the other thing to think about with the whole topic of reuse and having this warning statement, for example, once in your system, if you have 3 different variations of that warning statement, it's not just 3 versions of that warning statement. It's across all of your publications, and it's across all of your translations. So now you're translating 3 things that are slightly different, which generates 3 different translations. So it's really compounding across your whole cycle here of your content management. So big impact for how you manage this. And the other thing that I will add on to that we also heard a little bit from Regina is this is really a mindset change. You know, you look at this chart and maybe visually you can kind of get the concept of how it works, but when you're authoring content, you do start to think about content a little bit differently. And that's a big element of this. You know, the technology is important, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that, but the way that you think about content and how you manage it and how you author it is really a little bit different in this context. And with that difference comes a lot more benefit and power. So one thing, though, that should not change is a word-like interface for a content author in order to be able to create or edit content. And so on this page, you're looking at 2 different panels. Just focus on the left-hand side of the panel or the page for a second, which is a very similar to a Word-like interface for typing your content in, but you'll see that it's broken out and then they're highlighted. So behind the scenes, XML is being generated. So it's in the background, but the content author never needs to see it or interact with the XML view of this. They're just interacting with a Word-like document. And structured content is not new. It's been around for decades. But in past iterations of this and in other industries where it is more possible, it has really been an XML interface. So you kind of have to be an engineer to be able to get the benefits out of it and to use it successfully. But in this sector, that's just not practical. Content authors need this kind of Word-like interface. So that's very important to your solution to provide that. And then over on the right-hand side is your comments panel. So that, again, it's kind of similar to Word or Adobe Acrobat, where you have the ability to add comments in and track, a dialogue of comments that may be created off of a review cycle, for example. All right, so moving on from here then, back to another diagram. And so now we're getting into these use cases or practical usages of this type of technology. And one would be the ability to automatically do submissions to multiple authorities. So if you think about your product portfolio, you will have a number of drugs or families, and then those could be different sizes, different dosages or presentations, and then they would be going to multiple health authorities based on what countries you market your products in. And then from there, you have your channels. So whether it's an insert or a carton, maybe a mobile app or a website, and many more. These are just some examples of the things that you might be using. And so if you think about all of this content that you're managing, again, getting back to the reusability, we had one customer do an analysis on their portfolio of products, and they believe that 80% of their content is reusable. Like, just think about that, 80%. Another that we work with is estimating 60%, even if it's 50% or 40%, that the opportunity for reusability, for speed, for more consistency, with that much reuse, there is a huge opportunity for this.
Jackie, could I just insert something here?
Yes.
I talked to a customer not too long ago, and they were talking about something like this, and they said that because of all of these different outputs that were all so similar, if there was a change, back at the core data sheet level, it would take them 7 to 12 months to get through and find all the places where that content needed to be changed in all of the documents and have it re-reviewed, have it reapproved, et cetera. 7 to 12 months for a small change seems just incredible to me. And so, to me, that's one of the big benefits of reuse right there, is taking months off of this process.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great point. And with what you're describing is risk, right? So if it's that complicated, is everything getting caught? Right? So you have a risk of missing something. And in most cases, when these are health authority driven, so you've got targets of dates that you need to hit. So there's a lot of external forces at play that are, I think, forcing companies to really look at this and figure out how they can become more efficient and being able to manage these deadlines and the timelines better than they can today.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So the next use case of this is looking at the clinical process. And so you have clinical trials protocol, you have your statistical analysis plan. The clinical study report could be created from those things. If you're managing content right in this part of your process, there's no reason you couldn't do it in the clinical part where all of that data is initially getting created, right? So if you have it at this stage, you've got more opportunities for this kind of reuse and automation that we've been talking about. And then beyond the clinical study report, there's other applications for this. And these things will change over time. There might be, and this certainly is not an exhaustive list, but there will be more and more uses that come from this type of content. So even in this part of the process, lots of benefit and improvements could be made if content is managed this way. The next one is speaking more specifically about artwork creation. Many health authorities require a mock-up, for example, to be included with the submission package. So imagine if you could, with the content that's created through the creation of the submission material, automatically create the mock-up and also ongoing create the artwork. And this, we're talking a lot about automation, and what we're not saying here is, let's just magically start creating things automatically if we start using SCM. The production artist does not go away. There is still layouts to be created. The design elements of what is being created is not happening automatically. We're just simply talking here about that copy-paste activity that Regina was talking about. There's room for error when somebody is manually going into a Word document, figuring out what they need to copy paste where. I mean, I use copy paste all the time. I'm not generating labels, but every once in a while I paste something and I think that is not what I copied. Where did that come from? Right? So then you go back and you weren't sitting in the right document. I've got 5 different things open at the same time. So there is just the opportunity for risk when you've got such a manual process. So the idea would be that your production artists spend time on the design piece, the things that they enjoy more than doing that copy paste activity. And then copy paste is removed and replaced with this more streamlined activity, still fully audited, still fully traceable. You still have your approval cycles, but you're removing some of that manual activity, so you get a lot of benefit from that. And then we move on to the leaflet creation. So this is kind of the same story, but with a little bit more complexity. So the carton or the label is more simple because it's smaller and it's 1 page. With the leaflets, you have the wrapping of columns and the insertion of maybe images if you've got your instructions for use here. So there's a little bit more complexity. And the other point here is that these are not proprietary tools. Like this should be in design. So in design, you can build this integration with your content. You can also build rules into an InDesign system so that it knows where to break the columns or where to make the columns flow and where the images should be inserted. So to David's point, these technologies are really advancing now, and there are a lot of things that you can automate. Again, not removing the design elements, not removing that need to do reviews of things. But if you think about like the change of a manufacturing address, it does not change the structure of the document. So somebody should not need to be going through and reviewing all of the content for one section of the document that's changing. These tools will help them focus on exactly what has changed so that they're not spending time in other places where it's not necessary. So lots of benefits from using these kind of tools and using some of the newer features available in them. And then my last scenario here is with the distribution element and the patient information. This is similar to previous use cases that I've talked about in that your content, if your content on the left-hand side of this page is structured, then it can feed into these different channels like HTML5. You may be using this if you're doing imports of PDFs or content to your own websites. Or Pharma Ledger is another example you might be familiar with. If you go to their website, they talk a lot about blockchain, but it's basically a mechanism to transfer patient information in this context to an output source. And then FHIR is another HL7 is a standards org, so FHIR is the standard that defines how healthcare info is exchanged between systems, right? So all of these different channels, and the channels and the outputs may change over time, and they probably will. Like, some of these things have not been around for a long time, and as new organizations and new ideas come to market, this list will get longer, and maybe some replacements here. But the point is that if you've got your content managed in a structured way on the left-hand part of this page, you can more easily adapt. You're more nimble. You can more easily adapt to changes that are happening along the channels and in the outputs. So you can be omni-channel a lot more easily if you've got your content structured this way. And on that note, I think I'm passing it back to Regina.
Yeah, I think Regina's going to talk a little bit just kind of about how this whole ecosystem works together. I'll just emphasize quickly here that a lot of the things that Jackie brought up, we use the term use case. These are not visualized use cases. These are actually use cases that we've done in practice. And so they are definitely things that are happening, but it does take some things to make them happen. And so here in the spirit of kind of the idea of showing the infrastructure in and around the technology, this is where we're going to have Regina come in and talk a little bit about kind of the whole ecosystem together. So take it away, Regina.
Yes, thank you. So building on what what Jackie just showed and what we've all said. So this picture, by the way, is not intended to represent everything in a pharma company or a med device company, but it is a representative. So on the left side of the slide, where we have clinical labeling and CMC, those are examples of areas where content is created. And you can see here we have represented that these different components of information are created typically by these different groups at different times over a multi-year span, but it looks nice and neat right here. These components are stored and managed in the Structured Content Management System, the SCMS, which typically provides an authoring interface for people to be working in the content, and then a publishing side where you can create those assemblies and publish out. I don't mean publish you could publish to the world, but publishing in this context really just means create that output that's going to go somewhere. In the upper right-hand corner, you can see the back and forth flow between the structured content, the RIM system, because the RIM system typically has a lot of that metadata, that information about the information, drug product, substance, that sort of information. Some companies, the teams I work with call this master data. So the master data can come to the structured content system and auto-populate once you've set up some integrations. The documents can go back to RIM to be organized and managed as a submission. And then, of course, RIM is typically the interface where you're then communicating back and forth with the regulators. So in this slide, we're showing a simple view of the whole ecosystem where content is created, it's managed in the system. You can go back and forth with documents and information through RIM and to the health authorities. And then, of course, there's the generating of the outputs, which is the document publishing. And that's where you can go out to the packaging, the labeling, education, even marketing, EHR systems. So that information is treated very much like assets for the company. It is data. It is some narrative or prose that gives the context to the data. And it's all kept together in a single source of truth that can be delivered either on its own or assembled into documents and other outputs, web pages, and so on. So anyway, this slide is in here to give the snapshot of the high level view of how this information all flows in and out based on your structured content management system.
Beautiful.
So David, back to you.
All right, so the point we're trying to make here is that the infrastructure is here, and if you want to take advantage of it, you've got to think about a few things. First of all, as we've really, I think, hit on a lot, a big part of this infrastructure has to do with technology, and probably the first place that a lot of people look when they think about taking a structured content management approach is they start looking at the technology specifically around the structured content management system. So Jackie's company, Esko, happens to have a really great technology here. And, this technology that you're looking for is you need to find something where you can, store and organize these components. If you're going to move to a component-oriented system, a lot of systems can probably store components, but to be able to actually organize them where you can easily find them, where you can easily reference things for reuse, that's a different thing. You also need to be able to have something where you can author content, edit content, review components, and do it in a friendly way. I think it was Jackie that mentioned this before that, in the past, one of the big inhibitors of structured content management moving has been, the editors, the interface. People didn't like it. They felt like they had to be coders. They had to be experts. And, one of our clients recently commented on another presentation I gave that this was the single biggest factor for them, is that their people realized they didn't have to be, coders to be able to work with the structured content components. So you got to have that piece on your technology. You got to be able to manage, things like, versions, and you got to be able to manage audit trail, and you got to be able to prove, that this is the right version, and you need to be able to say, yep, this component's the right version, this component's not been approved yet. You need to be able to state all those things. And of course, you need to have a technology that can create those outputs. So when someone says, I need, an output that I can submit to the health authority in Singapore, your system needs to be able to go and grab all the pieces that it needs, all the components, all the most updated, all the approved, and synthesize them together into a document that can be submitted to Singapore. Sometimes that may be a Word document that needs to be submitted, so it needs to be able to put together a Word document from that. Sometimes it's a PDF. It needs to be able to create a PDF from some of the components. Sometimes it's XML. It needs to be able to, put together an SPL file for the FDA. And that's kind of the critical piece of this technology. But that's only, part of it. Another part of this critical infrastructure is, in addition to the technology, you've also got to have targets. And when I talk about targets, I'm talking about the things that are going to help you to make the most of your new technology. You can't just jump into this technology and say, all right, let's go. It does involve a change, and if you want to make this easy on everybody, you need to address some things up front. And specifically, it's useful to get yourself a good consultant, somebody who understands both pharma and somebody who understands both structured content. This is like what Content Rules does. Regina works with her clients on helping them as they're using this technology to get it set up in the right way. You're not just going to flip a switch and move forward, because your company is going to do things in a very particular way. How granular your components are, how your Lego bricks are divided, it's going to be, particular to your particular. It's going to be very particular to your organization, right? So you need to work with somebody on what's your content model going to be. What are the key pieces of metadata that your people need to be able to find it? And what are the key pieces of metadata that you need to be able to produce the outputs that you want? How does your reuse strategy going to work? Where do your affiliates, fit into all of this? What are the terms that everybody can agree on in your organization? Getting those things set up at the beginning are going to make this whole implementation process a lot more successful. Without these kind of targets, that technology will only get you so far. So you really need to make sure that you plan for both. And the other thing I would say that you need to be thinking about is really the transformation of existing content, right? So most organizations, when they move to one of these kinds of systems, they're not going to just start, fresh with new labels. They've got old content that they need to to bring in. Sometimes it's in Word, sometimes it's in PDF, sometimes it's in InDesign, sometimes it's in other formats. And it can be very beneficial to bring this stuff over. And that's where a company like mine comes in. DCL, or Data Conversion Laboratory, we help to convert the content to be able to be optimized for your system. Now, to make this really, really easy, a company like ours will come in and just outsource the whole process for you. We'll take a look at the targets that you've developed with your consultant. We'll take a look at the technology that you're implementing, and we'll try to get this set up so where we can bring those over so that you have a nice reuse library that just works, all right? So, Content Rules is going to work with you on getting some templates together so you can create new things, but then we're going to work on bringing some of the old things together that can work hand in hand with some of those new things. So that's three key things to think about: the technology, the targets, and the transformation. So we're getting closer to the end of our time here. So let's get into the summary and the Q&A time. Thank you to those who put in questions so far. If you have questions, please get them in here. Before we get to the questions, we do have a quick poll. You should be able to see on your screen which statements best align with your organization's approach to structured content management. A, we haven't even started. B, we need a way to analyze our content. C, we've got an initiative, but we're not quite sure what to do. And D, we deliver some info in a structured format, but we'd like to move in other areas. So with that, I'm going to let you guys answer for a second. And Jackie and Regina and I, we can talk amongst ourselves.
Yeah, I always find it interesting when we do these kind of polls, because I think the three of us probably have all different opinions or maybe similar opinions about what the audience is, where the bulk of the answers are going to land. But it's always interesting to see the different, I think we're going to see a lot of different answers here. I don't think we're going to see everybody in one category.
I definitely agree with that. Regina, I think back to you telling me something recently when you went to a conference earlier this spring that was the same conference that you had attended a year ago, and just how much things have changed, and yet still how diverse people were when it came to this topic of structured content management technologies.
Absolutely. I think the conversation is shifting, or has shifted, from, is structured content ready, mature enough? Is this something that we're going to move to? And now the question is how? How are we going to move this? What use cases going first? Obviously we need to do this. So that was a very interesting shift in just the 1 year.
Well, all right. Well, let's jump in here. We've had a handful of people submit, and the results we got, about half. We haven't even started our strategizing yet. We got 25% saying we're still not exactly sure what to do. Got some that have said, yep, we've done a little bit in SPL and Health Canada kind of things, but I'd like to move to other areas. And then a handful said that we need a way to analyze the content. So very, very good. All right, well, let me hit on the summary really quickly here. So, we started off the conversation by saying, what is it that really drives change? And we posited that it was, you've got to have, a technology, but you've also got to have compelling reasons for the change, and you've got to have the supporting infrastructure, tools, et cetera. So then we went in, and Regina hit on, kind of the background and all the benefits, but then said, those benefits aren't necessarily what's driving it, but there are at least three compelling reasons, and really probably more. The pandemic has reset our need for speed. Users, no matter who those users are, have got new demands and new expectations when it comes to content, and paper is just not going to do it. And then there's a whole host of regulatory change happening that is starting to drive, these conversations. So then we moved over and we talked about the infrastructure side, and that's where Jackie talked about some of the real life use cases that are happening. We talked about tools like structured content management systems, like what Esko has, authoring tools, things like that. And then we talked about things that you can think about in terms of you got to make sure you get your targets with your technology, and you need to think about transforming some of your existing content. All right, so that's our quick summary here. We do have time for a couple of questions. One more quick poll here. Please, if you would, just answer here. We'd like to take a deeper dive into structured content and the technology supporting it. You got 2 choices, so it's pretty easy. And we'll give a second for that to come up. And then we'll start jumping into some of the questions. Thank you for those of you who have put in answers. And Regina, while we're getting these last few answers to the poll in, why don't you take a look at the questions list that we've got there, and we'll have that ready to go here.
Yep.
I'm happy to jump in here and ask.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry. I was just going to say I'm happy to jump here and ask one of the questions here that we've received, if that's okay.
Oh, perfect. Yeah.
Sure. So we have a question or a statement here from Craig saying, sustainability is a big issue to be addressed. I personally know that many regulatory assessors who were completely burned out after COVID efforts, and this has had long-term impacts in terms of performance and retention.
Yeah, I think definitely we've seen that, and I think that sustainability is certainly a big issue. Regina, I think you mentioned sustainability earlier in how these content processes work. Any comments here on Craig's comment?
Yes. First of all, 100% agree. Sustainability, and again, people not working themselves to the bone, but still getting some speed. And I think one of the structured content done right really does enhance comprehension, brings a higher level of accuracy. There's fewer things to question and query, makes it easier to find and target into the part of information that you are looking at. So part of the goal is actually user experience for those regulatory assessors, because the way we've been doing things with a very print-based paradigm does not lend itself to speed. And then the way we had to do things during the height of the COVID pandemic is definitely not sustainable. So I could go on and on, but I know we're in our last 2 minutes. So that's absolutely one of the goals and benefits. And if it is a compelling enough reason to help the businesses change, I highly support that.
Yeah. Felicity, you have other questions?
I think just as we're 2 minutes until the top of the hour, I think we might have to wrap it up there. But if there are any questions that anybody would like to enter into the Q&A box now, we're more than happy to pass them on to David, Jackie and Regina, and I'm sure that they'll be more than happy to answer those via email.
Absolutely.
So I think we will wrap it up there for today. Thank you again so much to David, Regina and Jackie for an excellent presentation. And just to briefly make a small announcement, I also want to thank our sponsors as well for sponsoring this Digital Week. And also just let everyone know that we have just recently launched a new event called Global Pharmaceutical Regulatory Affairs Summit, which does take place in Brussels from the 23rd through to the 25th of October. And you can book your pass today at informaconnect.com/regulatory global pharmaceutical regulatory affairs. And if you do that by midnight on Friday, then you can save some money off your pass. So I just did want to call that out too. And thank you to all of the questions that were submitted today. And this session was recorded, so you will receive a notification in 24 hours when the on-demand session is available for viewing. But on behalf of Informa Connect Life Sciences, thank you so much and enjoy the rest of your day.